All right, welcome everyone. Happy 2018, Happy New Year. Today is January 4th. This is the first meeting of the Storage Special Interest Group for Kubernetes for the year. Today we have a handful of things on our agenda. First up, Luis is going to give us a demo of CSI working with Kubernetes. Then we're going to go through a planning exercise for 1.10 release of Kubernetes for the storage SIG. For that, take a look at the agenda. There's a planning spreadsheet. If there's items that you think we should be working on, feel free to add them to the spreadsheet, and then we can review it and assign folks. And then there's a couple other things on the agenda that we'll get to in a little bit. I'll get started. Luis, go ahead, and you have 10 minutes.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. So let me actually share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. I have placed these slides link on the agenda, so anybody can go ahead and see them. So what I'm going to be showing today is a small demo of how CSI works with Kubernetes. First, I wanted to thank the team that was able to accomplish this. We actually, we made a Herculean effort to make this happen for 1.9. So I want to thank everybody that had the chance to participate, and not just in the team itself, but the larger team of the communities also. So thank you guys. Couldn't have been done without you. Second, I'm going to give just a extremely high-level overview of how CSI works. For those who are new to it, CSI is a specification, is the contract between the client, being the container orchestration systems, and the plugins, which are then there to manage storage. They manage attachment and detachment, mount, on-mount, identification, listing of volumes, and such. This is just a subset of the operations. For more on the full set of operations, please check out the CSI specification. This is a image taken from the design document for Kubernetes. And I just wanted to bring this up. I know there's a lot here to show, but I wanted to show you that there's multiple parts to the way that CSI interfaces with Kubernetes. Kubernetes doesn't know anything about CSI, and CSI drivers don't know anything about Kubernetes. So there's a set of helper containers that are able to kind of manage that bridge in between. There's three specifically. One is called the external attacher, where it kind of manages attachment detachment actually, and actually a set of API calls from gRPC for the CSI spec. Second, there's the external provisioner, which most of you are very familiar with. And lastly, there's one more called the driver registrar, which communicates with the CSI driver to be able to then have this name mapping between what the COs have as a name for the node and what the CSI driver has a name for the node. It has a kind of that mapping in between. And I'll go through that through the demo, but I just kind of want to give you a big picture of that, how that works. Again, there's a lot of documentation available. We have the spec. We have a project in GitHub which houses all these containers and their sources, and then we also have the channel WGSCSI in Slack. You can come in there and ask questions, and we can definitely help. But I want to bring one up here. It's called the CSI documentation. So this here has a lot of documentation, not just on how to set up your Kubernetes, but how to use it too, how to write drivers, how to deploy in Kubernetes. And we're going to go to deploy Kubernetes just to give you a better picture. And here we have what we just talked about, which is the external attacher, the external provisioner, the driver registrar. These are all the helper functions, the helper containers. And then it talks about how to set them up. It talks about how they communicate with CSI driver and such. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's continue on. So now with the demo. All right. Can anybody see my console?
Yep.
So is the font large enough, or should I make it larger?
Oh, it's plenty large.
Yep.
All right. Okay. It's good. It's good because I'm old and blind eyes. All right. Here we go. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm using the kubeup from Kubernetes, and I have set up these systems using on GCE. So I just want to let you know that everything's clean. I have 3 nodes and a master, and I can show you what these are aliases. K is just kubecuddle, KN is kubecuddle, and Q system namespace. Okay, pods. So I can show you that everything's running, everything's fine. Okay. So before we go ahead and deploy my host path driver, I have to explain a little bit of what's going to happen. First, there's some restrictions with this driver, the CSI driver I'm going to use for the demo. This CSI driver is not, it's a host path driver, so it's for a single node. So I cannot deploy it on every node and have it just work for any pod. I have to force it to go in the same node. But it still uses the same concepts of CSI, and I'll still go and show you how it works. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more thing before we continue. Get nodes, and I'm going to put everything's going to go into this node. So I'm going to say KK. So I want to show you first that there's nothing here for the annotations, nothing here that maps the naming from what Kubernetes has as a name to what the CSI has as a name for this node, specific node. And I'm bringing this up specifically because I want CSI developers to know how the interaction works. So once this host path driver gets deployed, the driver registrar sidecar container will actually put an annotation there for the node, and which will be used then by other parts of the Kubernetes. So let's first check out the host path and see how this works. Host path driver. First, I have a storage class. Everybody's familiar with that. And this storage class has a provisioner called CSI host path. Okay. We have a service account that I'm creating. We have a set of cluster role bindings for RBAC because the sidecar containers need to be able to, first, the external provisioner needs to be able to create and delete persistent volumes, needs to watch for persistent volume claims. Then we have the external attacher that needs to be able to watch for this new object called volume attachments. Volume attachments is a new object that was introduced in 1.9, and there's a lot of information about that in the design documentation. So we can skip cluster role binding, can skip this, and here is a stateful set. So normally what you would do is that you would create a pod with your sidecar containers attached with your CSI driver. And what they do is that they communicate with your CSI driver over a Unix domain socket. Okay, so I'm not going to go through. Huh?
4 minutes.
Okay, awesome. So just letting you know that this, I'm not going to go through every part of this. This is all documented in documentation. I just want to show you now the demo itself. So I'm going to create the host path, and then say get pods, and there it is running. Okay, so now we can go back to the edit, and we can see that the information has been set there. And this information means that this CSI driver with the CSI host path name calls this node by that name. So that's all working. That means the driver registrar is working. So now let's say get storage class. There's our storage class right there. Now let's look at our sample pod. Persistent volume claim using the storage class host path. And that's it. This is all the same as everything else, as you can see here. And so let's create that, which is all normal workflow for creating an application and some storage. And now it's creating the object, the container. Oh. There is the PV has been created. And there it is running. Okay. So how much time do I have left? 1 minute probably?
2 minutes.
All right. So let's look at the cool stuff for the developers here. Let's go into the system. And let's go check this out. Let's go var, what is it? libcube plugins. Cube plugins. So in here, we have a directory that was created by the pod on host path. And in here is our socket location. This is where we can communicate with CSI. So that's how all these Cycler containers and the kubelet communicate with your CSI driver. And any questions? Everybody's just blown away. It's like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. All right, then. Well, if you have any questions, we'll all be available in the WG CSI channel and on SIG Storage channel in Slack.
All right. Thanks a lot, Luis. That was great. So there's a lot more work left to be done. We're going to talk about some of that during our planning session. And let's kick that off. I'm going to share my screen. This one. Go to the planning spreadsheet. Okay, so I pre-populated the 1.10 spreadsheet with some of the items that were incomplete from 1.9 or were in alpha and potentially should be moved to beta now. So we're going to review those. If you have anything else, please add to the bottom, and then we'll talk about them when we get to them. First up is block volume support. I imagine there's additional volume plugins we want to add, and I'm not sure whether we want to move to beta or not. Erin?
I think I'd feel more comfortable once we get more tests in that we could move to beta, and additionally having a more broad number of plugins as well. So, you know, including like GCE and AWS, I think those are key. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think we're ready to go to beta yet.
Okay, so this quarter it'll be focused on adding additional volume plugins and adding more tests? Correct. Okay, and are the set of folks assigned as lead on this okay?
I think so. Mitsuhiro, are you planning on helping this quarter or not? It may just be Scott and I don't know.
Okay, feel free to update that. And then Michelle, are you okay helping review some of that? Sure. Okay. Cool. Status priority, we're going to keep that as P1. It's important for what we're doing. Next up is enabling containerization of mount dependencies. Jan did work last quarter to get this to alpha. Do we want to commit any work to move it to beta?
The last agreement with SIG-Node was that it will be alpha forever, just to enable tests in E2E, but there is a feature called MountPropogation, and that should go to beta because it is necessary for CSI.
Right. Okay. So let's change this to MountPropogation.
And I'm not sure I can devote any work this quarter. I would like to see more tests. Especially testing the existing volume drivers with containerized mount utilities. That would help, but we'll see.
Is there anybody in the community who is willing to drive the MountPropogation feature from alpha to beta this quarter? This is a good opportunity to jump in and help lead a major feature. And it's a critical requirement for CSI. So if you have any interest in making CSI work, take a look at this.
And Saad, we can put, I mean, it's not necessarily off the table for us. I mean, it's,
Okay.
if we get our other stuff done, we could potentially do this right. I mean, we don't have to commit to it right now.
Okay.
We could probably tentatively put one of, maybe Jan here or myself, and then kick it off, in a couple of weeks when we have a better idea what our schedule is like.
Cool. Sounds good. And in the meantime, if there's folks who are interested in contributing, this is the time to step up and take ownership. Don't be shy. There are folks who have done this before who are willing to help you with the process. So don't feel intimidated if you're sitting on the sidelines thinking about whether you should volunteer or not. Next up is the CSI volume implementation. We've been having separate meetings to keep track of things for CSI. Our last meeting on Tuesday, we created a list of items that we want to go to beta. That list of items is very, very long. Some of the folks who worked on this last quarter are not going to be able to work on it this quarter. So we are looking for volunteers. If you are interested in helping work on CSI for Kubernetes, please add it to the agenda. And I will reach out to you and we'll do assignments tomorrow morning. I'll set up a meeting with the CSI implementation group and we'll go through and assign these items. That said, realistically, the list of items is very large and some of the items have a dependency on the CSI spec itself, meaning the changes need to be pushed into the CSI spec and then the code within Kubernetes needs to be updated. So realistically, I think pushing to beta this quarter would be a stretch. For now, we can keep that designation, but realistically, it's probably going to remain in alpha for this quarter and then move to beta the following quarter. So the plan is, as we reassess going through the quarter, we'll continue to evaluate whether this should have the beta or alpha label. We'll start with the stretch goal of trying to make beta this quarter, but we'll see how that goes. Again, we're looking for volunteers. If you are interested in helping, please add your name to the agenda doc, and I'll reach out to you later today. Next feature is generic storage topology solution that works well with CSI, local storage. This is something that we've been wanting to do for a while. Currently, the volume subsystem in Kubernetes hard codes the concept of zones and regions for two cloud providers, AWS and GCE, and I believe Azure as well, I'm not sure. But what this means is that it's not very extensible, it doesn't work in all environments, and we need to do a better job here. And the task here is to come up with a more generic mechanism to handle any arbitrary topology within Kubernetes such that an arbitrary volume subsystem can provide information in a generic way about where volumes are provisioned and allow Kubernetes to use that information when it's scheduling workloads, and vice versa. When Kubernetes wants to influence where a volume is provisioned, it should be able to do so. So this was design work that I had scheduled for last quarter. I wasn't able to get to it, so we're punting it to this quarter. I'm going to make the goal for this quarter to design this feature and try to get a prototype out if I can. Next feature is volume resizing. I believe it has been in alpha for 2 quarters. Hemant, do you want to talk about the plans for this?
Yeah, I think we would just want to add more tests. We already have some entire test review. We just want to add more tests. And we'll keep it alpha this quarter, I think, because until something changes. Right?
Okay.
Is anybody using this? just curious, like anybody in the community, has anybody used Resize?
I think there's been a lot of interest in it. I know folks from IBM were thinking about porting it to Flex.
Yeah, and there's
I think more than one folks asked me from the Flex side. So I think there is interest, but I'm not sure how much of it is getting used because there is no support in Flex as of now.
Yeah, there's, as I said, from IBM, there's a lot of interest, so we would be dependent indirectly on this feature being working. So.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to keep it in alpha for this quarter. We're going to add more end-to-end tests, hopefully get more usage, and see how people are using it, and then reassess next quarter and try to drive to beta. One thing we want to avoid is the trap of remaining in alpha or beta forever. I think a lot of features in Kubernetes fall into that trap, and it takes us a very long time to get to GA, and there are many users who are afraid of or simply can't, due to policy, use features that are not marked as stable. So we should try our best to get these things to GA. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we do it in a sane manner and don't rush things. So for this case, I think it's fine to leave it in alpha for another quarter, but let's try to move it to beta in the subsequent quarter if we can. Okay, next item is snapshots. So there was no work done in the last quarter as far as I'm aware. So this quarter, I was thinking let's make an attempt to pull this code in tree and add it to some of the existing in-tree volume plugins. Thoughts on that? Jing, are you on the line?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Right. So as you just mentioned, we plan to work on this snapshot and also discuss how to move it to in-tray, whether it's possible, and also for CSI design to incorporate in CSI like interface, and also work on some custom controller to do the policy-based snapshotting.
Okay.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Why do we need that entry?
So that's a good question. I was talking to Jing about this yesterday. She said it's currently out of tree. It works nicely. Do we really need to pull it in tree? My question then was, well, how does an arbitrary storage provider implement snapshotting capability? And it sounds like the way that the feature is currently implemented, it's an external controller, an external snapshotting controller, and that controller has in it hard-coded logic for different storage providers. And so what that means is if you're a storage provider who wants to provide snapshotting ability, you need to go and update this controller in the Kubernetes external storage repo, add in logic to handle your storage provider, and then when a user ships or deploys this controller, then your storage provider should have the ability to do snapshotting. This is the same problem that we have with the in-tree volume plugins, in that we are requiring third-party storage vendors to come in and modify Kubernetes specific code to make to extend it to add capabilities for their subsystem. And that's unmaintainable. It's difficult to test, and that's a model that we want to get away from. So then the next question is, well, how do you get to a external model where the storage vendors can implement this independent of Kubernetes components? And that, I think, fits nicely with the story that we've come up with CSI, and that's a natural home for snapshotting. So if you implement a CSI driver that can provision a volume, attach a volume, mount a volume, it's very natural to be able to say, I also want to add the ability to do snapshotting in that driver, and then have Kubernetes handle it through that path. And if that's the natural place that we want to be, in order to get to that place, we need to first pull this feature in tree so that we make the in tree volume side of things snapshot aware. The controller gets pulled in tree, and the internal interface gets updated to handle snapshots. And then the next step would be to plumb it through the CSI and add it to CSI as well. And
So-
that way, as a vendor, you only need to add it to your CSI driver.
So my question is, because got things like external provisioner, external driver registrar, and all these cycle containers for CSI, and they're
Yep.
all external already.
Yep.
So I completely agree that we need CSI to somehow, maybe not CSI, or maybe an extension of CSI to have snapshots. But I just still don't understand why it needs to be part of in-tree Kubernetes. I would suggest that instead that it is kept externally until CSI or an extension of CSI has snapshot support.
That's a good point. And that may well be the case. So far, what we've noticed with both external attacher, external provisioner, is there is some component on the Kubernetes side that needs to trigger these things. In the case of the volume attacher, there's a volume attachment object that Kubernetes needs to create. So there's some level of changes that we still need to make. If we can get away with absolutely zero changes on the Kubernetes side and still be able to drive towards CSI, wonderful. But let's evaluate that and go
Okay.
from there.
All right.
Okay, so is there anybody who wants to take the lead on working on snapshots? I'm not sure what Jing's availability is going to be this quarter. She's going to be working on some capacity isolation projects. So she may be able to help guide it, but I'm not sure if she's going to be able to drive it. Is there anybody in the community who wants to take the lead on it?
So I'm interested in it. I can talk to Jing.
Yes, sure. Yes.
And sorry, what was the name of the person speaking?
Xing, X-I-N-G.
Yeah, so we already worked together on snapshots before, yeah.
Perfect. All right. And Jing, do you feel comfortable with that? Having Zing take the lead and then you can help review and guide it?
Sure.
Okay. And Wamin, are you still interested in helping with this feature, review it at all, or should I put Jing's name here?
Woman's pretty overbooked.
Okay. So I think I'll put Jing's name there. Cool. Next up is the local persistent storage static pre-provisioner security hardening redesign. Michelle, the last quarter, this was designed. The plans for this quarter are to implement it.
Yes. So is Cheng on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, the plan is just to go ahead and implement it and push it to alpha.
Okay, seems reasonable. And it sounds like Chang will be the primary person working on this, and Michelle will be reviewing it.
Yep.
All right. Next up is enabling Cuddle to expose capacity isolation resource information. Jing, do you want to talk about this?
Yes, so basically we just want to implement so kubectl top can also show hekumar storage just like SQL memory.
Okay.
And so I think there are some changes in monitoring pipeline, and we probably need to work on the new metric server for this part. And next week we'll talk with monitoring team and to finalize. It should be done this quarter, yeah.
Okay. And is Yuquan the right person to develop this?
Yes. Yeah. Yesterday I talked to him. I think he's probably should be available. Yeah.
Okay. And let's make sure there's a feature bug open for it, if that makes sense. Otherwise, we can mark this as a bug fix. Your call. It sounds like a feature, so I think we should open a bug for it.
Okay. Yes. Probably already have one. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, if there's already one, just reuse that. And then it sounds like the next item is related, expose capacity isolation resource management for local ephemeral storage metrics.
Yes, we already done work for expose the metrics through summary API,
Mm-hmm.
and also with Prometheus metric format. So we'll just see whether we need to do anything more, in Kubernetes. I think
So
it's pretty much
complete.
Yeah.
Is there anything that needs to be done to move it to alpha, or?
No, it's not really alpha. It's
Okay.
the summary API is already GA, so it's just available. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll reassess whether there's anything that needs to be done here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Next up is enable Cuddle to expose PVC usage stats. How much of this was completed last quarter and how much is remaining?
The Cuddle side is not being worked on at all.
Okay.
That requires, like what Jing was mentioning, that requires more functionality on the metric server side, which is not part of what we're doing this quarter, this past quarter. So, so yeah, that still has to be done.
Okay, and so we'll keep it on the spreadsheet, and you are the right person to work on this, Chang, and Jing will help review it.
Yes.
Okay. Next up is preventing PVC deletion when pods are using it. Paul helped drive this to alpha last quarter. Question is, do we want to drive this to beta this quarter?
Yes, I want.
Excellent. All right. So we'll keep that. And are you the primary developer for this feature for this quarter?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next one, associated feature, which we didn't have a chance to work on last quarter. Prevent PV deletion when it is bound to PVC.
Hey, Saad, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm interested in this, and I talked to Pavel offline. He didn't have enough time for this, so I put my name here.
Okay. So we're going to try to drive this to alpha this quarter, and Nick, you're going to drive this?
Yeah, I will send a proposal for it.
Perfect. All right. Encryption of empty dir, I'm going to leave this unassigned for now. If folks want to work on it later in the quarter, feel free. It's a nice to have feature that if we have resources for, we can jump on. Support additional default flex volume plugin directories. So I think currently flex volume supports looking at only a single directory. This is something that Jared and his team have been asking for a while. It got dropped from last quarter. Jared, are you still interested in driving this?
So Saad, after thinking about it more, I don't think this is the best approach to take here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close that issue from the feature repo, and we can probably remove this from the 1.10 planning spreadsheet here.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Cool, thanks, Saad.
Next up, some stuff from Michelle, volume scheduling, dynamic provisioning design, which depends on the generic topology design. Michelle, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so this is just the extension of the work that was done last quarter to do the volume binding during pod scheduling. So that was the work done there was to handle the statically created PVs. So now we need to look into how we can support dynamic provision.
And this would be mostly design work this quarter?
It would be mostly design work, I anticipate. And yeah, and with the other items too, it also is going to depend on the topology, generic topology design, and to evaluate if the PV node affinity that we added is the correct API to use.
Makes sense. Okay. Next up is local persistent storage raw block support. So block support was added in general to the volume subsystem last quarter. Local storage is one of the volume plugins that we're hoping to expose it in. And it looks like Diraj has been signed up to work on that. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. That'll be next. So next up is local persistent storage to beta. Are we ready to go to beta with local persistent storage this quarter?
That might be a stretch goal,
Okay.
again, because it also depends on the topology design.
Okay.
And also it depends both on the topology design and the volume scheduling to go to beta. So because it has those two dependencies, I think this one might be a stretch.
So we'll go ahead and mark it as potentially beta for this quarter, and then we'll continuously reassess throughout the quarter and possibly downgrade it back to alpha while we make progress towards it. Okay, that seems reasonable.
Did someone have a comment?
Okay, next item is dynamic max volume per node count. This is something that's been on our back burner for quite some time. There is a maximum number of volumes that the scheduler will allow per node. Currently, it's hard-coded. So, for example, for GC persistent disks, it's hard-coded to 16. The limit, in fact, GC size, for example, can vary depending on the size of the VM.
It's not strictly hard-coded. You can change that via environment variable.
That's true. You can change it with an environment variable, but that makes the assumption that you have access to the master to do so, which if you're running on GKE, you don't. So it's a little bit painful, and we would like to make this be set dynamically so that when a node starts, it should report for the volume plugins that it has available what the limit should be, and the scheduler should be able to use that. Is there anybody in the community interested in helping design this? Jing helped design a version of this last quarter. There was feedback on that, and you're welcome to take the feedback and start working from there, so you're not starting completely from scratch. Okay, in that case, we're gonna keep it unassigned for now, and then as we go through the quarter, we'll see if somebody from our team can pick it up. All right, next item is flex volume resize support. So the IBM folks reached out and were very interested in this. So flex volume is an API that we want to continue to support, but the call that we made was that we would like to stop extending it and instead focus our efforts on CSI. But the flex volume, or the IBM folks reached out, and their point is valid. They have a flex volume driver. CSI is still in alpha. And in the meantime, they don't want to be blocked out from features like this. And so they asked for just one feature, flex, which they're willing to help develop and add end-to-end tests for. And it sounds like Zoo is going to be working on this from the IBM side.
Yeah, that is correct. And one thing I want to mention, Saad, this is Sandy speaking, we're also willing to actually update the flex driver adapter for CSI so that there's corresponding support
that would be
to kind
great.
of move the flex driver to CSI. So once Tom finishes this, he'll work on the CSI side as well.
Perfect. Okay.
Go ahead, Tom, if you want to say any more.
Yeah, so Saad, we have already put a design doc link in the ticket, but we still need some time to finish the doc. So once it's done, we will send it out for review. Okay.
That sounds good to me. And we spoke with Chakri offline, and he has agreed to help review this. All right.
Thanks.
Next item is local ephemeral storage to beta. Jing, what work remains to be left here, to be done here to drive this to beta?
I think it's mainly like enable the feature gate, to remove feature gate, and also the related like metric work should be done.
Okay.
Sure.
And I think beta has its own special feature gate, so it would be moving from the alpha feature gate to the beta feature gate. So it sounds like it'll be minimal amount of work, and I think Dean can help drive that, and I can help review. Next item is interesting. It's redesigning the volume reconstruction code. As a lot of you who've dug into the volume code and have looked at some of the bugs, you'll discover oftentimes a lot of these bugs are related to the volume reconstruction code, which kicks in when kubelet crashes to try and recover information about volume mounts. When kubelet crashes, all the in-memory state is gone, and normally what would happen is that we recover state from the API server, but it's possible that pods are deleted while kubelet crashed. And in that case, we could end up with orphan mounts on our node that need to be cleaned up. So the volume reconstruction code attempts to try to recover as much information as possible from the volume mount path, actually. And unfortunately, it doesn't have enough information, and this causes all sorts of issues in our system. So Jing has a proposal which she pasted in as an issue, which would overhaul this system and try to just simplify it to say if we find mounts that we have that are completely orphaned, we have no indication that they belong to any existing pod, we just go ahead and unmount those mount points, as well as do reference counting to ensure that any global mount points are also cleaned up as well. So this is a design that Jing came up with, and we're looking for volunteers in the community to help actually implement it. Jing would be available to guide you and to show you where the code is, but this would be a great opportunity to touch core volume code for anybody who's interested. Any volunteers?
I can look in this. Hemant here, by the way. So I have similar bugs related to like there's like it's an ongoing problem that we have in some of OpenShift clusters as well. So it needs to be fixed.
Okay, that would be perfect. Thank you, Hemant. And so I put you down as the lead developer for this, and Jing will help review it.
That sounds good.
All right, 2 more features left. One is improving node failure handling. Jing, do you remember how this is different from the previous one?
So right now it's just different cloud provider like have different behavior of when node, let's say, shut down, restart. And there are still some issues. I think Hemant fixed some in AWS, and some other like Cinder still has issues, but someone I think right now is trying to fix it. We know the root cause of this because the cloud provider has different behavior when node is failed.
Okay.
We need to make sure this can handle it correctly, yes.
And you mentioned somebody was already working on it. Do you know who that person is?
So I can search his GitHub ID and ask him whether he wants to put his name here. Yeah.
The only that has this problem?
Yeah, this problem exists in, it used to exist in AWS, but AWS we fixed last quarter. Cinder, someone, zetaab, Z-E-T-A-B, I just, his name, that's his GitHub handle. That guy is trying to fix it for Cinder right now, and it potentially might exist in other cloud providers too, depending on how the shutdown, how the cloud provider handles a shutdown node actually. So.
Okay, so we'll track it for Cinder for this quarter, and we can revise this to add more volume plugins if the need arises.
Yeah.
Okay. Can either Jing or Hemant add the name of the developer who's working on this, please?
Yeah, sure. And I'll add myself as a reviewer as well. I'm already reviewing it. Yeah.
All right. So the last item here is improving local volume attaching. So the background here is that There are 4 major methods that the in-tree volume plugins implement. One is to provision a volume, one is to attach a volume, the next one is mounting a device, and the final one is actually mounting the volume to the pod. The difference between these last 2 steps is mount device is required if you are an attachable volume plugin, and it is called by the Kubernetes system once per volume per node. So the first time that volume gets scheduled to the node, it is triggered, and for things like GCE and AWS, it results in a global mount point of the device, the iSCSI device. And then the subsequent mount calls are called every time a workload referencing that volume is called. So every time a pod referencing that volume is referenced to a node, the mount call or the setup call is called, and it will bind mount from that global mount point to the final mount point. This works very nicely for volume plugins that implement the attach method. The problem is there's a set of volume plugins like iSCSI where there is no concept of a remote attach, but they do have a concept of a local attach. And so to work around this, what folks were doing was implementing an attacher that does a no-op and then implementing mount device where the local attach is called. So the suggestion for this task is let's make mount device a separate optional operation that can be implemented independent of the attach call. And so for volume plugins like iSCSI that have no need for attach, they don't need to implement the full attacher. They can implement just the mount device call, and that will result in cleaner code both on the volume plugin side and on the Kubernetes side. Is there anybody in the community who finds this interesting and is willing to take the lead on working on this?
Kubernetes community meeting is Thursday, 1 p.m.
Okay, so we will leave it unassigned for now then. I know there were folks who were working on a solution for iSCSI. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they're interested in helping drive this. If not, we'll keep it unassigned for this quarter and reassess next quarter. And looks like we have one more item added by Hemant, volume metrics. Hemant, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this was in last quarter actually, and we have pull requests. This is not one feature. It's like, I think we can take this as bug fixes for each individual test case, each individual case, and I have opened a spreadsheet that I already sent to the community in the SIG Storage mailing list, and people are putting their name against it, against them, and I want to be able to take ownership of it and implement individual volumetrics that is listed in that document.
Right.
So incrementally, I think we'll have more metrics in 1.10, but it's not going to be one single feature. So I think, yeah.
So
but,
are you looking for
I will take
developers to
ownership
help?
of this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking for developers to help on this. There's a spreadsheet that I have shared in the mailing list. So I'll just link it here again, call for help. And if you are interested, put your name against it and I'll be.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, so that concludes the planning session for Q1 1.10. If there's any other items that you think we should work on, speak now, or you can just add it to the spreadsheet over the next week and we'll reassess. Feature freeze for Kubernetes 1.10 is January 22. So we have a couple of weeks that we can, before we have to set in stone what we're working on.
I can't see the spreadsheet, but do we have shepherds for all these things too, not just developers?
Yes, reviewers, correct. We have both a developer assigned and a reviewer for each one of these items. Okay, so next item on the agenda after planning is to discuss the onboarding to storage SIG planning session that we talked about at our last meeting. The idea here was that there's a lot of folks in our community who are interested in helping but don't quite know where to start. And Michael Rubin, when he attended a KubeCon, kind of heard a lot of this. And he suggested, let's do something about it. How about we have a introductory session outside of the regular meeting that this group holds, which is just a onboarding session or a class of sorts, where folks in this community who are veterans can present on topics that are obvious to folks who've been working on this for a while, but are new to people who haven't been in the community. So in our last meeting, it sounded like everybody was on board for this. We brainstormed some of the ideas for presentations, things like local dev environment setup, what to contribute, what does the SIG need help with and appreciate, how to propose and add new features, et cetera, et cetera. And we got a handful of folks to volunteer to do presentations. We need more people to do presentations given the number of items that we have.
I think we need tests in there as well, and I'm happy to volunteer myself or my team to do that. In addition, how to make an API change. Scott Creeley just went through that. There's some subtle things you have to understand when doing that, like the creation, code creation and all that stuff that, is above and beyond.
That's documented.
It's documented, but it might be nice to just do a quick presentation on it. Since you've already put it together and presented it to our team, I think would be helpful. That's okay, Scott. Didn't mean to volunteer you without asking.
Sure.
Thanks.
So that would be great. It sounds like there is a need for this material. So the next steps for us are to pick a date and pick a format. As for format, I was thinking just another one-off meeting. We'll do it over Zoom. We'll record it and publish it. And then as for date, I was thinking late January. Does that sound okay to folks?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so who's going to maybe drive what the topics that we want to talk about are and then find speakers for each one or like moderators for each one?
Does anybody want to take the lead on driving this project?
Driving the presentation and onboarding, I can take the lead on that.
Yeah, I mean, just being able to coordinate and say, these are the things we'll discuss, and then we need to find someone for each one of them would be huge. I was about to offer some, t-shirt or free tattoo or something, but
I'll pass on the tattoo, but I'll always take a hoodie.
Okay.
I'll pass on the thing, raise you a hoodie.
But that said, I think this would also only really be successful if we have, the audience that it's aimed at also contributing. I know that, there have been many people who told me that this would be a great idea at KubeCon, and it seemed like it got good response when it was brought up last week, or the last SIG Storage meeting. Is there anyone who is not, a veteran of SIG Storage that wants to also participate with Erin as a partner? I think we have a chance here to do something that will be modeled on by many other SIGs for a long time. So I think that, we could really do it right here. Someone from, I don't know who's on the line right now, but from either Portworx or NetApp or IBM. I mean, these were people who had approached me.
I'll go on.
Sounds like Luis is in.
Thank you, Luis. I'm sorry to call people out, but
no problem. I think actually it's good because specifically not just from the SIG Storage side, but there's an extension of that also towards CSI and what's happening. So doing this together is going to be good.
Yeah, and that's perfect. I love working with Luis. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh, awesome sauce.
You'll make me cry.
All right, cool. So it sounds like our two leads for this project are Erin and Luis, and we're going to have a Zoom recorded meeting, possibly multiple of these sessions. We'll start with one and see how it goes. And preliminarily, let's schedule for sometime in late January. Maybe Aaron can send out a straw poll, and see what dates work for folks.
Yeah, and let's not wait to the next meeting. Like, feel free, send stuff in email now. Let's pop open a document and say, what do we want to talk about? And, and then turn it into a little schedule.
Yeah.
It may not just be one sit down. It may just be 2 or 3.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll copy what we already have here in the agenda as a start. Add a column for assignee or volunteer, and then possible dates.
Perfect.
So comment.
All right, this is going to be fun. That is pretty much it. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss today?
I always do. You know that. I had a question.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of email. I guess there's 2 parts to this one, and I don't know if I...
Do you want to squeeze in here?
Oh, I love squeezing in between engineers. So there's a short question and a longer one, maybe. The short question is, I want to make sure that I understand it. A lot of people have been asking the status of Flex, whether it's beta or GA. In 1.9, it is GA, correct?
Correct.
In 1.8, is it GA?
Officially, no. So what designates it GA or not GA was essentially just a comment on the API, and that comment was only merged into 1.9. We don't intend to merge it back into 1.8 because that's technically a feature change, and you don't cherry pick feature changes back to older branches. When we shipped 1.8, it was considered alpha. When we shipped 1.9, we promoted it to GA.
Okay, Shay, are you on the line? Or anyone from IBM on the line?
So this is Jesse, by the way. So FYI, our public documentation explicitly says it was GA in 1.8.
I'm not sure.
I think this is Chakri. I think it was made in one of our comments actually. So since it didn't take the card, maybe we can backtrack on that. But
so Chakri, can you please take ownership of this with Jesse, and maybe make sure that it's very clear in the doc?
Yep.
Because people are first off, the work was done too well, which means that everybody wants it ASAP, and there've been some requests from people about having it be GA'd somehow in 1.8. And then I think there is also some confusion over it also.
Yes, the only question I had was actually, I was supposed to reply to the email thread. The only question I had, I want to sync with Saad was, are we going to allow to market GA in 1.8 as a cherry pick?
Yeah, that's where I'm concerned. Normally we don't. You once a branch ships, you don't get the opportunity to change its designation. We could probably squeeze it in if we wanted to, but I think the bigger question is, do we need to?
I think there might be some customers who want it, and that's the reason I'm bringing it up. Yeah. I mean, like let's get rid of all of the release paperwork for a second.
Yeah.
Basically, we're talking about like flipping a documentation bit to enable people who get things done. And so this isn't really about like changing a feature or adding in code. If that's what if we can do that, why not?
Okay, I'm hearing a yes then. So let me try it and let's. So
if there's a need, and that's the real thing. So how about sending out mail to SIG Storage and saying how many people really care about 1.8, and if it's more than if we think it's enough critical mass, let's just like look into it.
And so the other interesting thing for me is, does it really make a difference if it's literally a comment on the 1.8 in the
actually branch? It does when we go to the customers.
Yeah, customers care a lot.
Okay.
So, that's the point.
The guarantee that we offer. So, I mean, as far as this SIG is concerned, the guarantee that we offer is the same. We've been cherry picking back two branches.
Right, but it matters a lot to the outside world.
Okay.
And so that's why I think, can Chakri, do you mind running with this? Sending out mail, working with Jesse and finding out where that documentation is and making sure it's really clear?
Yes, I will do that. Okay.
And then the bigger thing is this. Do we have one place off the community page that describes the relationship between in-tree plugins, Flex, and CSI, and the timeframes for
There's
all.
a blog post that's going to be coming out very shortly on Kubernetes IO that's going to.
Okay, a blog post is one thing, but I think there needs to be like a long-standing place off the community page that we can update as plans change and get updated.
That's fair. Okay. I think there is such a page. It just hasn't been updated in a while.
Okay. So do you want to take ownership of that as sort of the CSI?
I can do that. Yep.
Cool. And can you send that to like maybe me or Jesse? Yeah. I know me at Google, we care a lot about this for communicating this internally, but if other people, I think, probably should be looking at this in the SIG too. So maybe send it to SIG Storage.
Okay, cool.
That's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Any questions, concerns, comments about that or about anything else? All right, with that, we'll call it. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. All right, take care, folks.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.